On the morning of January 15, 1947, a woman walking with her daughter in a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood spotted what she thought was a broken store mannequin lying in a vacant lot. It wasn't a mannequin. The body had been severed at the waist, drained of blood, and posed deliberately, with no trace of the killer left behind. Over 60 people would later falsely confess to the murder. The case was never solved. Almost 80 years later, the world still knows her by the name the newspapers gave her, the Black Dahlia. Her name was Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old, originally from Massachusetts, and had moved to California chasing the same thing thousands of young women did in the 1940s, a shot at being noticed in Hollywood. She never got a real break. Friends described her as friendly, a little guarded, someone who moved often and rarely stayed in one place long. In the days before her death, her movements became difficult to fully trace. She was last seen on January 9th, 6 days before her body was found, near the Baltimore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, reportedly waiting to meet someone. What happened in the days between that sighting and the discovery of her body has never been definitively established. For 6 days, nobody reported her missing. Nobody knew where she'd gone. And then on a residential street in Leimert Park, a mother out for a walk with her young daughter found her. The scene investigators arrived to was unlike anything the LAPD had handled before. The body had been clearly severed at the waist, drained almost entirely of blood, and positioned with a precision that suggested the killer had taken time, not fled in panic. There was no blood at the scene itself, which told investigators immediately that she hadn't been killed there. The body had been moved. The press descended almost immediately. Reporters nicknamed her the Black Dahlia, a play on the recent film called The Blue Dahlia, combined with her habit of wearing dark clothing and styling her hair in the same dark waves that were popular at the time. The name stuck within days, and the case exploded into one of the biggest media stories in Los Angeles history. Detectives were flooded with tips, rumors, and false confessions almost immediately. More than 60 people would eventually confess to the murder over the following years, none of whom could be connected to the crime with any actual evidence. The sheer volume made the investigation harder, not easier, as detectives spent enormous resources ruling out people who simply wanted attention. Investigators pursued hundreds of leads, men Elizabeth had dated, acquaintances from diners and bars she frequented, even members of the medical community, since some of the detectives believed the precision of the injuries suggested the killer may have had surgical or anatomical knowledge. No arrest was ever made. 10 days after the body was found, someone claiming to be the killer mailed a package to the Los Angeles Examiner containing some of Elizabeth's belongings, including her birth certificate and address book, several pages of which had been torn out. Investigators were never able to fully trace who sent it. Within months, leads dried up. Within a year, the case had gone cold. The LAPD kept the file technically open, but as the decades passed, it became clear that whoever was responsible had either died, left the state, or simply never been connected to Elizabeth at all. In the decades since, the Black Dahlia case has generated more suspect theories than almost any other unresolved American murder. Some of the most cited names including a traveling salesman with a documented history of violence against women, a former Army sergeant who lived near the crime scene, and several doctors whose access to surgical tools made them persistent suspects in the eyes of amateur investigators. The most well-known modern theory comes from a former LAPD homicide detective named Steve Hodel, who became convinced after his own father's death that his father, a prominent Los Angeles physician named George Hodel, was responsible. Hodel pointed to his father's documented connection to law enforcement corruption at the time, his medical background, and letters he claimed linked his father to the case. The LAPD has never officially named George Hodel or anyone else as a confirmed suspect. Critics of the theory point out that much of the case against him relies on circumstantial connections and interpretation of ambiguous evidence rather than anything that would hold up as definitive proof. Other researchers have pushed back on the entire premise of a single serial predator, suggesting instead that Elizabeth may have crossed paths with organized crime figures active in Los Angeles at the time, given how efficiently and completely her trail went cold in the days before her death, something amateur killers rarely manage. What nearly every researcher agrees on is this: the level of precision at the crime scene, combined with the complete absence of forensic evidence connecting any single suspect, suggests whoever was responsible either had specialized knowledge, meticulous planning, or both. Almost 80 years later, that combination has never been definitively matched to one name. Elizabeth Short came to Los Angeles hoping to be seen. Instead, she became one of the most famous unsolved murders in American history, known to most people not by her own name, but by the one the newspapers gave her days after she died. Nearly 80 years and dozens of suspects later, no one has ever been convicted. If you had to bet on one theory, which one would you believe? If this is your first time here, we cover one case like this every week, the ones that were never fully closed. Subscribe if you want to keep digging with us.